You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook.
And this was definitely not what Steelers fans had in mind, as a bad snap began a bad night to be a Pittsburgh Steeler and a Steeler fan. Welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Polk, joined by Chris Ward, Guthrie, Rasmussen, and Jimmy Spizzirri. A somber podcast as the Pittsburgh Steelers lost the AFC Wild Card game to the Cleveland Browns 48-37 on Sunday Night Football, bringing an end to their 2020 season. There's a lot to talk about on this podcast: the Steelers' performance in this playoff game and their future in regards to personnel at all levels, and as a whole, their future as a contender in the AFC North. We'll start with the crucial moments of this game, and the score really does not describe how heartbreaking this loss is. A blown snap by Marquise Pouncey trickled all the way into the end zone and was recovered by the Browns' Carl Josephs for a touchdown. Then the Steelers' offense straight just spun out of control, and the defense could do little to stop it. A 3-and-out sandwich between two interceptions by Ben Roethlisberger directly led to Browns touchdowns, and the entire world was stunned as the team from Cleveland got out to a 28-point first quarter lead. Everything about that first quarter was just plain awful. A microcosm of all the Steelers' problems this season happened in that quarter. What are your thoughts on this epic meltdown of epic proportions, for lack of a better term?
I'll just start and say, this sucks because we started out 11-0, and just to end like this, it's kind of heartbreaking. Going 1-5 these last couple of games of the season, it's definitely just a very pretty unfortunate collapse here by the whole team. There's really no words here. That, like you said, that first snap of the game, you just knew it was going to be that type of game. It's like, when you sit down, like when I started watching the game, I was kind of looking down at my phone because you don't expect the first play to always be, something like that crazy. But then as soon as you see the ball go back and everybody's running back, you're like, oh no, it's just going to be that type of game. So there are really no words, just very disappointing.
Yeah, they just came out completely flat, and like you guys mentioned, when Pouncey snapped that ball over Roethlisberger's head and into the end zone with the Browns recovered, which, Roethlisberger and Connor, I don't know what they're doing. They could have, kicked the ball into the end zone or something like that, or at least covered it. But, there's no excuse for, a veteran center and I guess a Pro Bowl center, too. He was named, too, this year, to have a bad snap on the first play of a game like that. And from there, Roethlisberger threw 3 interceptions in the first half, and on 2 of those interceptions, the Browns offense came out on the field and turned that into a touchdown. So, that's 21 points right there. They spotted in 21 points, basically 28 too, 28 points in the first quarter. You're down 28-0. It just that was the game there for me. The rest, I give Ben credit for his 501 yards passing, and Juju for, having a big receiving day. But, it was kind of like garbage time, I thought. The Browns were just, in prevent defense, and basically a prevent defense, and they're just giving everything underneath. So it was just really similar to the Jacksonville divisional round playoff loss in 2017 when they spotted Jacksonville 21 points, and the offense came back, and then when the defense needed a big stop, they couldn't come up with it. And defense just didn't show up, no sacks, no quarterback hits against the Browns, and that's what they excelled at all year, was getting after the quarterback. So just a real disappointing game on both sides of the ball, and the coaching was also horrendous.
Yeah, Chris, I think you definitely got it right when you said it reminded you of the Jacksonville game, and there was just a different feel to it, though, because even in that Jacksonville game, you knew that we still had the offensive firepower to make something happen and to come back into that game. And this team, this offense just didn't have that. So, once that snap went over Roethlisberger's head, and then once that next interception where he overthrew Snell on that little check down, you didn't have that feeling that they could overcome this. You can't be spotting any team in the NFL 28 points, on any day, but especially a playoff team, especially a team that can score with you, no matter how good your defense is, and when you don't have that. You don't have that 2017 Roethlisberger, that 2017 Antonio Brown, that 2017 Le'Veon Bell. You just don't have that. And when you give a team that many points to play with, I mean, yeah, they're going to give you the underneath stuff like you said earlier, but there was just really no chance of coming back into that game.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Do you guys think any of this has to do potentially with giving those guys a rest the week before? Do you think there's kind of a fine line where you got to kind of earn that rest? I know you got to preserve your players, but I don't know. It's just, after seeing that first snap, it's just kind of for what, with Pouncey wise and all the interceptions, it's just maybe it would have been nicer to do the Josh Allen type of treatment where you play a half. What are your guys' thoughts on that Veteran Day? I know it's kind of in the past, but I'm just wondering if you guys think that has an effect on players as a whole.
I thought Roethlisberger, it is what it is. Pouncey and Ben are kind of just veterans, and you'd expect them to come out and play. But, obviously Roethlisberger came out rusty as usual. I mean, since the Ravens game in Week 12, Roethlisberger, I guess you could give him the second half against the Browns, but like you mentioned, I was you're playing basically a prevent defense. But other than that, the second half, the 17-point comeback against the Colts was really the only good half he had down the stretch. So it's makes you have a lot of questions going into the offseason. Is Roethlisberger, can he play one more year? I mean, that's all I think he has left is probably this one last year. He's going to play out his contract, and that would be it, unless he just decides to hang it up, before then.
The one thing I'll say is I think he's got 41 million reasons not to hang it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's it, though. Sorry, go ahead.
Going back to your question of whether that week of rest, really impacted the Steelers, I wouldn't lean towards it impacting them. They've had bye weeks before. They've had weeks off before the playoffs. I really don't want to say that, but at the same time, it wasn't the rookies, it wasn't the second-year guys making the mistakes. These are, the 10-year veterans, the 17-year veterans that really lost the game for us yesterday. And kind of what you said about earning your rest, I think some of the thought process was maybe, Pouncey was just getting blown up all year. Maybe give him a week, get him healthy. Maybe you get a little bit of that old Pouncey back in him, but clearly that didn't come back, and Ben came out slow as he has been. And like Chris said, one half of good football in the final 7 weeks of the season, doesn't really instill a lot of confidence in me and him being able to come back and do it next year and, give us a realistic shot at a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Pouncey, he just played his worst game of the year at the worst time, the biggest game of the year. He got blown up on that 1 3rd-and-1 play where they handed off to Derek Watt for the second time for their reason. He got blown up, and I don't know. I think I tweeted that as they should revoke his Pro Bowl nomination, which was kind of a head scratcher how he even got that to begin with. Because Pouncey's obviously a great player in his career, but like his last couple of years, I didn't think he played at a Pro Bowl level, and some people think he's a Hall of Famer, which is, I don't know. I think he's probably just a great player, but not into that Hall of Fame range.
It's the classic day late, dollar short offense from the Steelers, and that's really what that second half was all. It gave hope, and you seriously sat there and thought, okay, maybe they could actually do something similar to Jacksonville, and because, it's just same old Browns, maybe they could actually pull it off just like it's 2002, but it's a new era in the AFC North. It's crystal. It's clear that there's going to be the AFC North is no longer a 2-team race, and maybe 3 if Cincinnati figures out what they can do. This is a 4-team race. Speaking of comebacks like clockwork, the Steelers did exactly do that. They got the score within 12 points, 35-23, including 17 straight from before halftime to throughout the third quarter, with consecutive Browns punts that led to touchdown drives by the Steelers. you could feel the momentum really shift because, again, it was just that, the running thoughts in your head that's going like, here comes the Steelers, and even some Browns fans were going, uh-oh. But trademark yards lost on a screenplay, coupled with the decision to attempt to draw the Browns offside in punt formation. Not even going for the fake, or at least starting to fake or something like that. Some sort of funky motion, nothing. It was trying to draw them offside on a punt. And then they punt on 4th and 6, and the Browns go straight down the field and score. Yeah, the Steelers go 4 plays and score right back, but it really felt like it was a deflator. And so the reasoning for that decision by Mike Tomlin was the belief that they would be able to stop the Browns, which, to be fair, again, back-to-back 3-and-outs. At the time, did you think that was the right call? I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I thought he should have went for it. They had all the momentum at that time, and it was 4th and 1. I mean, it sounded like Roethlisberger. Well, they don't want a quarterback sneak it, but like if it was any other quarterback, they would probably quarterback sneak it and got that first down. I kind of understand his reasoning about the defense. I think he expected a better punt from Jordan Berry, who booted it into the end zone for a touchback, but they didn't pin them down there inside their own 10. So and they had they forced 2 3-and-outs prior to that. So I don't know. I guess he expected the defense to come up big there, but it's kind of like the Jacksonville game. I go back to that. Once the offense gets going and the defense needs a big stop, they didn't come through.
I'm going to say one name, and it's Josh Dobbs. I mean, that's the kind of play right there. Usually, it would have been nice to have a player like Dobbs or even Mason. Why can't you run a QB sneak there? Maybe it was a long yard. The offensive line is atrocious sometimes. Put Dots in there at center. Just, I don't know. I just think that you have to be able to get a yard, and as Tomlin says, you can't live in your fears, blah, blah, blah. It's I don't know. I just thought, like you said, I just feel like weren't we on the other side of the 50 or just on the other side of the 50? It's just when you get
just
that
before. It was like the 46.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I still would have gone for it just because, I don't know. It was just kind of do or die then. It's like if you don't get that, you're going to lose. And I just felt like by punting it, it's just kind of like that was just a very passive call. And, I don't know. I just definitely would have gone for it. Just you have to have some sort of play, a go-to play for those situations.
Yeah, I think my biggest issue with the decision to punt there was the drive before that. Tomlin opted for just the 1-point conversion just to kick the PAT. And by doing that, he made it a 12-point game. A lot of people were saying, Al Michaels mentioned, the right move there could have been to make an 11-point game. But on the flip side of that, by kicking the 1 point, you were allowing yourself a field goal cushion from Cleveland, to still keep it a 15-point game and not having to go for 2 twice. So when you give yourself that 3-point cushion, you would need to take that 1 yard risk, to try to get yourself within 5 points, because if you don't make it there, your defense can still give up yards and still give up a field goal, and you're still right in that football game. I think the decision to not go for it there, like Guthrie said, was passive, and they just went right down the field, scored on them. We couldn't have predicted that, but at the same time, how different could it have been, if we went for it there, and if we made it, it's a 5-point game potentially, and even if we miss it, you still have that 3-point field goal cushion that still has you in a 2-possession game.
I agree. This is not the same team that a couple years ago they had, the Killer Bees at the height of their powers, where it seemed like Tomlin was just like, yeah, let's just go for 2 just about every time. I mean, it's going to work out because there's just weapons out there, and you can argue they have the horses to do something about that. James Conner, fairly good on short yardage situations. Chase Claypool, I know the back shoulder fade is kind of like a blasé thing nowadays, but when you have a guy like that, and especially with Cleveland's best corners out, you just got to go sometimes, hey Chase, go to the corner, we'll throw it up to you. I mean, there's so many things that the Steelers could do in these situations. I would be content with never seeing a quick slant again in my life from here on out. But that's just me, guys.
Yeah, definitely all those quick passes. I just next year I just can't go through that all again. I mean, it was nice, the first kind of half of the season before everybody figured it out. Kind of that's what we're doing. That's our identity now. But to some extent, it just got too predictable at times because the pass rush even was getting there quick enough for Ben to get sacked, beforehand, before he got it out quick. And at that point, you just have to change up your identity a little bit. Do you think they planned that out kind of because the offensive line was questionable maybe that, hey, we need to get this out of his hand, or do you just think it's strictly just to keep Ben upright, or a little bit of both?
And you saw the batted passes at the line of scrimmage become an issue. I think the NBC showed a graphic that Ben led the league in getting his passes batted, and that turned it into an interception, his third one in the game. So just those short passes were definitely predictable, and I think they have the receivers to excel better when they throw the ball down the field. Just the question about can Ben get it down the field to them?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the advantages of how they approached the season as a whole, and Ben getting rid of the ball as quick as he did. Not only, has the offensive line regressed, but you have a lot of playmakers that can make something happen after the catch on these short underneath routes. And the fact that by doing that, you kind of have an extra little insurance policy on Ben to make sure that he can start a game for you in the playoffs. But we were in the playoffs now, and especially down the stretch when we're losing seeding, we're losing a potential bye, great. I mean, we got to week 14 in a position to get that first round bye, but the stubbornness not to change the approach when it was clearly figured out was really frustrating. And, if you're too scared to stretch it out, if you're too scared to have your quarterback, hold on to the ball for more than 3 seconds, then that's something you should have addressed in the offseason to make sure that you had a passable backup as well. I think that the way that they approached this season in terms of the passing game was just a really scared approach, and that once it was figured out, they just weren't willing to change it because they were too scared of what would happen if Ben got injured.
Yeah, I don't think they did Ben any favor by not having a reliable running game, not upgrading the running back position in the draft. Claypool had an amazing season, but you kind of go back to the whole J.K. Dobbins thing. I'm not saying that they should have drafted Dobbins instead, but I mean they had to get something this offseason. Definitely, they have to get a better running back than what they have. James Conner is probably most likely done. Benny Snell Jr. and Anthony McFarland Jr. Don't really give you too much. I know McFarland's a junior, but I don't know. What do you guys think about Snell? Have you seen enough as him that he's not really going to be maybe he's a serviceable backup at best, maybe.
Are you talking about McFarland specifically?
I was talking about. I think we still need to see more from McFarland, but I was thinking Benny Snell Jr.
Oh, yeah. Benny Snell is just. I want to continue to see growth, but this year he definitely, after that first game, he had really high expectations, and it all kind of came crashing down throughout the whole season. I wouldn't say he's done, really, but, this will be his last year, I believe, to really prove that he belongs.
And heading into Week 17, Ben didn't play that game against the Browns, but he had the most pass attempts heading into that week. So he wasn't leading the league in pass attempts at the end of the year just because he sat that final week. But, for a quarterback to come off of, major elbow surgery, I don't think they did him any favor by having him throw the ball so much and have such a, pass-happy offense.
We'll talk about this a little bit more with Roethlisberger's historic, with a caveat, day. But I want to get back to what you mentioned earlier, Chris, the pass rush. You mentioned no sacks. Here's the most shocking thing out of that entire factoid. They had no quarterback hits. And by quarterback hits, I know you're probably thinking of that scramble, but that only counts when it's behind the line of scrimmage and it's after a throw has been made. There was absolutely none. And no sacks. Again, the last time they did this was coincidentally the playoff game against Jacksonville where they had no sacks. And that was with Blake Bortles, a mobile quarterback. But they at least had 4 quarterback hits. And the previous week, which is so frustrating for the entire thing when I saw this, was that with reserves in a low leverage game, They had 4 sacks. They had 4 quarterback hits. I understand that TJ Watt was getting held, and I understand that Alex Highsmith left the game with an ankle injury. He's currently getting an MRI with that, according to his father on Twitter, and we wish him the best for his recovery. What happened? That's almost inexcusable. I can understand a team having no sacks out there, and yes, Baker Mayfield was doing his best Jake the Snake Plumber impression all night, and it worked. And it was really probably one of the catalysts towards Cleveland's victory, but when you're basically just, when your pass rush is like your biggest thing and it doesn't show up, that's a huge in which you go, okay, yes, the personnel was lower, but then there's a certain point where you have to look at your defensive coordinator and go, hey, what happened here?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, especially since the Browns also had injuries on their offensive line. You at least expected something. They should have been a big factor in the game. They really weren't.
I wrote before the game that I said Hayward should have a big game because Joel Bitonio, their pro ball guard, was out at left guard. And Jake Conklin, he kind of left pretty early in that game. He's an all-pro, but when did Highsmith leave the game? Because Jedrick Wills, he didn't give up much pressure there on the left side. I know Highsmith was dealing with injury. Highsmith had a pretty good game against him in Week 17, but Tuitt and Hayward just really they didn't show up for this game. It's really disappointing. I'm a big Cam Hayward fan, so it's hard to criticize him. But I mean, the same thing happened against the Jaguars in the playoff game. Just the defensive line just did not show up.
And especially considering we just paid this man after Week 1, it's like you're expecting. It's like, all right, Cam. I understand we love you here and you've done this before, but it's especially in this game, you got to make your money here, man.
Yeah, I mean, credit to the Browns coaching staff. I mean, they didn't even have their offensive line coach and their assistant offensive line coach there. I mean, they have a really talented offensive line. Pro Football Focus ranked them as the number 1 offensive line in the league. Wyatt Teller had a great game. I saw him doing really good stuff in the running game. There's just a real solid unit up front, and they played a great game against the Steelers.
Yeah, I don't want to make this sound like I'm defending these guys in any way. They definitely didn't show up to the degree that they needed to in order to win. But when you find yourself down that many points that early, Cleveland had no ambition to hold on to the football. They had no ambition really to throw the football at times. I mean, they were just content with short little screens, run the ball, drain the clock. It's hard to get in a rhythm as a pass rusher and try to get to Mayfield when he's only dropping back and holding on to it, once every 3 or 4 plays. A lot of pass rush and the pressure and sack numbers, it's kind of situational, and why the Steelers have been so good in that department, these past few years is because they've been winning football games and forcing teams into passing situations. And in a game like yesterday, there was just no need for Cleveland to do any of that. They weren't going to let TJ get the big strip sack. They weren't going to let our secondary come up with a big interception. They were just content keeping it short, keeping it conservative because of the lead that they had already built.
You have an excellent point, and trust me, just lost in between all the anger, that is very valid right there, because again, when you go one play and your offense fumbles it away and then decides to throw picks in their own end of the field, and then all they need to do is just have 3 plays and it's in the end zone, touchdown again. Again, that's another great point right there. It's just shocking how you go there, and even a day after this game, you just don't know. You're just going, how could this happen?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I kind of want to touch on this a little bit. It's like the whole Claypool said thing, saying that they're still the same old Browns and blah blah blah. It's like when you lose a game, it's just kind of, you got to keep your mouth shut. Because this Browns team's actually they're a really good team. I mean, even despite having guys out, they really came in and shocked us. They came to Heinz Field and kind of almost pretty much exposed us. And so all this talk, the media, it's just, at this point you just have to be really careful, because if you lose, you're just never going to hear the end of it. And I don't think I'm on that table with people Juju saying, same old Browns comment, I think he was kind of quoting Tomlin a little bit, and I think people just kind of ran with that, and I feel kind of bad for that. But for what Claypool said, I just think that's kind of uncalled for, because that Browns team, they came in and they were ready to play, and they made the most of those opportunities. Baker looked sharp. But their running game looked even sharper. They were just the better team that night.
Yeah, Mayfield threw 3 touchdown passes. 2 of those were 40-yard touchdown passes each. One to Landry, which, man, that was a bad angle by Terrell Edmonds there. That was a real frustrating play there. Edmonds looked really bad in that game. And then the other one was Chubb on a screen pass. Chubb had a great game. Kareem Hunt had 4 carries for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. He was averaging 11 yards per carry. The tackling was atrocious. It was just overall just real ugly game. Credit to Mayfield too. I wrote before coming into this game, he only threw 1 interception in his last 9 games. He take care of the ball really well, and they rely on that strong running game. And the defense down the stretch, they couldn't turn the ball. They couldn't get takeaways. I think 4 of their last 6 games, they didn't get a single takeaway, and all 4 games they lost. So that just tells you what you need to know really about the collapse really down the stretch.
The closest was just off the fingertips of Steven Nelson that I remember. And sometimes you think, man, if it's just a little bit lower, he snags it. And it seemed like it was prime pick 6 territory for the Steelers, but it just wasn't their day. And you mentioned a little bit with the pass defense, the old bugaboo of middle linebackers on wide receivers, specifically number 1 wide receivers. And fresh off of injured reserve, Robert Spillane was abused a little bit by Jarvis Landry, who's an excellent route running wide receiver. And you just have to go. This reminds me a little bit of the Jacksonville game, because I believe that there was linebackers on wide receivers too, and it's just like everything just went straight to hell last night. I can't really stress this any more than what it's already been said and what has already been stated as the obvious.
Yeah, what I think kind of needs to happen, this is kind of goes deep into Steelers history. I think these guys like Fickner and almost Keith Butler might need to – the Steelers might need to look at replacing them and letting Tomlin bring in his own guys, because, these guys are from the old regime, like whether they're friends with the Rooneys or whatever. They've stuck around through thick and thin. I'm just wondering what would happen if they just kind of let Tomlin go out and interview his own guys and see if that would help. I don't know, though. I really don't. I just feel like some changes need to be made. I just hope that they don't do something stupid and renew Randy's contract, because his contract's up. Randy Fickner's like a fart in a skillet, he could be gone.
But also you have to remember that these are technically, in a way, Tomlin's guys as well. These guys were on the same staff at Arkansas State. So
really? I didn't even think about that. And they've been here through, the Super Bowl in 2008, Super Bowl in 11. That's a very good point, I didn't even realize that. It's just, I just definitely think that they need to be looked at. I don't know.
There needs to be a more modern approach on offense, and there's so many ways you could do a 3-4. They can go look up in Chicago with what they have with Khalil Mack, and they have in a way, if they manage to keep it, a Khalil Mack on each side in TJ Watt and Bud Dupree if he decides to come back to Pittsburgh and he's back to full strength after this knee injury. They're in a unique situation in which they could do that. And honestly, what they really need to look at is one thing. TJ Watt can attack from multiple angles. They really need to consider switching up where they position their linebackers just to throw different looks at them and make offensive lines think. If you have this rookie tackle and Highsmith's out, why not throw TJ Watt at his side and just say, hey, rookie, welcome to the NFL, and just try something? there's so many things that I go with it. It doesn't have to be this cut and dry the entire time. It could be something in which, and especially, they're going to have to get more outside linebacker depth, because it's not just Highsmith. You also have to go back and have someone for TJ just in case. And also, with that linebacker, that has to be a rotational outside linebacker piece. We cannot have guys just sit on one side and basically say, hey, he's coming this way. Good luck. This can't happen anymore.
Yeah, Ty, you're making a lot of really good points. I think the theme of the season was just kind of the refusal to adapt. And whether that be on the offensive or the defensive side of the ball, just using TJ in one way, refusing to change anything about our offensive approach in the first half of football games. It even came down to deciding to start Filer at guard over Dotson. I mean, the pure refusal to think outside of the box a little bit is what eventually, caused the demise of this year's team. You see the best teams across the league, they adapt, they adjust on the fly. And for some reason, this team seems so rooted in their, in their preseason plan, like things don't go as planned in the National Football League. And if you can't adapt, you can't expect to win. And that was the theme of the year to me, was just, the refusal to address the backup quarterback position, the refusal to address the offensive game plans, and just the refusal to get creative on defense when you're down guys. That's why we're not playing next weekend.
It's organizational arrogance, if I'm going to get all Mark Madden with it. I mean, it goes from, it's one thing with the wide receivers. It's another thing when the coaching staff is not willing to go, okay, this is not working. It's time to switch things around and just make it difficult for them to pick up guys. Because TJ Watt's not going to get a one-on-one every single play. It's not going to be like against the Colts where on I think the second or third or something like that play, they get lucky and an offensive tackle is basically left with guard TJ Watt. That's it. That's not going to happen in this league. This is not Madden.
I don't know if you guys follow Warren Sharp on Twitter, but the whole game he was just basically trashing the Steelers coaching staff on some of the decisions. Tomlin, not going for it on 4th and 1 and deciding to punt, or Keith Butler having Spillane guard Jarvis Landry in the second half, where he completely destroyed the Steelers. And he posted on Twitter today how it was similar a couple years ago when Keenan Allen did that route to get a first down on Vince Williams, and it was basically the exact same play. It's kind of a linebacker matched up with a receiver in the slot, which is going to lose every time in that matchup. But just Keith Butler had a really bad game. Bad game plan last night. Mayfield was excellent against the blitz, and they couldn't get after Mayfield. And I don't know, what did you guys think about Randy's? I mean, Randy. I mean, Ben was throwing those interceptions, and Pouncey, snapping the ball into the end zone. That's not on Randy, but I mean, I'm not a big fan of Randy either. I think he should go, to be honest, just his overall work this year.
Yeah. I can't really speak to yesterday. Any offensive game plan that we had just went completely up in flames after that start, and that was just Ben drawing things up, in the second half there. But I do believe I'm very hesitant to say that, we should fire this coach, move on from this coach, but Fiechner is definitely one that, it's time. He was Ben's guy. It was a good hire at the time. It was who Ben wanted, and if Ben wanted him, that was the right move in my mind. But you don't have prime Ben anymore. If you don't have prime Ben, then, Fiechner kind of loses that sort of edge, that you can potentially have. And I think you just need a fresh mind, a newer, more contemporary voice in that room.
Yeah, as you mentioned about mobility, watching the two games this week over the playoffs with Rivers and Ben, they can't move. Rivers really was never a mobile quarterback, but he's just stationary now. And you see pretty much the same thing with Roethlisberger. You don't see him making those being Ben type of plays. The only one I could really think of this year was he rolled out of the pocket in week 2 and he hit Deontay Johnson on on a pretty long touchdown on the run. But I mean, other than that, like we just haven't been seeing that. And I think it could be it for both Rivers and Ben. If not this year, then definitely next year.
Yeah, if you don't have an offensive line and Tom Brady survives in this league because any offensive line that he has comes correct. And there's also a system there that's in place. And the Steelers right now have no system. When Mike Munchak left this team, the offensive line soul was gone, for lack of a better term.
And also we'll mention about the slow starts. I mean, Steelers didn't score a single offensive point in the first quarter since Week 10 against the Bengals. And you know, they haven't had a first down, I think. They had one with Rudolph against the Browns, but with Ben, the last first down on their first opening drive was against the Jaguars in Week 11. So, you know, down the stretch, the slow starts are just, you know, mind-boggling. And it really, you know, did them in the playoff game against the Browns.
Hell, the last time they scored on their opening drive was against Tennessee. And now, whenever you want to go back and look at how the Steelers performed this season, you can really say they left their heart in Tennessee.
Yeah, Randy, he just can't script plays. I think, and before that Tennessee game, the last time they had an opening touchdown drive on their first possession was against the Patriots in Week 15 in 2018. So I mean, it's very confusing. With I don't know what the Steelers see in Randy, but I think they could get a much, you know, younger coordinator there that's more you know, creative in his play calling and you know, more up to date. I think maybe Matt Canada. I don't know. He's never called plays in the NFL, but I would like to see the Steelers probably go outside the organization if they were to get rid of both of their coordinators.
And now let's talk to the problem du jour, and that's the offense. And again, if this was the last game of Ben Roethlisberger's career, more than likely not. 47 of 68, 501 yards, and 4 touchdowns is one hell of a way to go. The only problem is there were 4 interceptions thrown. Mostly batted balls, and just why pass. There was an interception that just kind of spelled doom for the Steelers. The focus on television was Roethlisberger crying on the bench, and we also seen a little bit of that Inside the NFL clip that you posted on the Twitter pages. It looked like a man who was absolutely spent. And I'm pretty sure you guys think this performance is Jekyll and Hyde. So we're not even going to ask what you thought about this performance because we all know what everyone thinks about it. So I'll ask the question that the national and local media has been posing since literally the final gun sound. I don't know if they do that in the NFL, but whatever. Do you think this is the last that we see of Ben Roethlisberger?
Oh, man.
Do you want it to be the last that you've seen of Ben Roethlisberger?
That's such a hard question to ask, you know, as Steelers fans. But at some point, I just don't want to see Ben look any worse. You know, this would be the year to end, you know, his career on. He did a really good job. I mean, the season as a whole, like this stat wise, you know, at the beginning, he didn't. At the beginning, I think we were at a point where I don't know how many interceptions he might have thrown. I think it was like 11 straight touchdowns without an interception or something like that. Maybe it was something, maybe like 1. But I just thought, you know, he's done good this season, but not enough to get us over the hump. And I just think if he sticks around, we're just going to be in the same position next year. There's just not much more I think he can do to get us over the hump unless he comes back with, you know, an updated offensive line. I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Because I'm just getting emotional thinking about it.
Yeah, I think he will play next year, but I don't see him, you know, leading the Steelers to another Super Bowl just because, like I mentioned, he doesn't make those Ben, you know, being Ben type of plays anymore. You just could see the age is catching up to him. And, you know, he did great things. He's one of the best players ever to put on a Steelers uniform, but you know, Father Time is undefeated against everyone, really. And, you know, that time is coming up, you know, very soon. If not this year, then, you know, definitely next year.
Yeah, that final drive last night, I tweeted out that I was just kind of soaking in, you know, this last drive. You know, I know a lot of Steelers fans may have been a little too angry, a little too just mad to really focus in on the game at that point anymore. But I was looking at the field, and Ben was taking the snap. He hit Juju a couple times on that final drive. Connor caught a couple check downs in the 2-point conversion. I was just kind of soaking it all in because, I'm not sure if that was the last time we've seen them as Steelers, guys that we love. And I think when it comes down to Ben, as we kind of alluded to earlier, there's 40 million reasons for him to come back. But at the same time, if you're the Steelers, do you bring him back? I know if you cut him, you get that $20 million cap hit, but that remaining $20 million is $20 million that you can spend elsewhere in keeping this defense intact. The way I kind of see it is that you need to go into each and every season believing that you can win the Super Bowl. And I think that if we go in with Ben without, if we keep Ben, we're not going to be able to make the improvements necessary to be able to confidently say that we can compete. Sure, things can go one way or another. We stay healthy, maybe. Maybe we hit on a couple big draft picks. But I think that you need to be able to make the decision to move on from him because it might hurt. He's put in all these years for this franchise. It's not the way you want to send him out, but it's a little, it might seem on the exterior as a selfish move of the Steelers, but on the flip side, it's selfish to 52 other guys on that roster that want to win a Super Bowl too. And how can you look at the other guys and say that, this is the decision that we're going to go with, if it's the same story next year.
Yeah, they did it with Troy Polamalu. They forced him out. Ben, similar status with Polamalu. I don't know how Ben will take it. He might take it personal if he still believes that he can play. But the NFL is a cutthroat business. These teams got to make their tough decisions. But it should be an interesting offseason. And I don't know if you guys read Dale Lawley's article on DK Pittsburgh Sports, but he basically it nothing official, but it was his thought. And what Dale thought was that he thinks Pouncey is done. He thinks he's going to retire after this season, and he thinks that's why Ben was so emotional on the sidelines after the game.
I did see that, and this is going back, years and years of interviews and things. And I one thing that's always stuck out in my mind, and I always thought would be a disaster day, was Ben and Pouncey said that they always wanted to go out together, And I don't know what that would mean for Ben's decision if Pouncey decides to go out, And like I said, I always kind of dreaded that day, but it's almost we've gotten to the point where, if Pouncey does go out, does that mean that Ben's going out too? And, that day might not be as awful as I once dreamt it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it would be sad, but it'd probably just be one of those things where, you just know it's kind of for the better. I don't know. I want to see Ben, just continue to be healthy. I don't want to see him sustain any further injuries and whatnot. Or if he does stick around, I just want him to be okay with potentially, mentoring somebody that we draft maybe in the first round. Let's say we go quarterback in the first round, crazy, instead of going with a running back. Say we somehow get a quarterback. I want him to be okay with potentially mentoring this player, kind of like a Fitzpatrick Tua situation kind of thing, a starter and a closer. I know that didn't work out well for them, of course, but he needs to be okay with that role if he is to come back even with that cap hit.
I would be okay with Ben coming back with massive offensive innovation and new personnel in key positions.
That's true.
And of course, the one thing is, again, with that Fitzpatrick situation and stuff like that, it could work. And I think that there was an issue with Mason Rudolph coming in. I think he kind of felt blindsided at the time, and he did say that a little bit too tongue-in-cheekly in his interviews when Rudolph got drafted. Obviously, I think it's going to be a much different situation this time. And he better be fine with it, because he has to be. He has to look at this organization and go, and especially see the writing on the wall and go, yeah, it's different now, and it's almost time. I think the injuries changed him. I think his personal life has made him more open to that situation. And I think, and I'm not going to say think, I hope that he's much more susceptible to this change.
Yeah,
I really.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, yeah. He's gonna be 39 for next season. 39 years old. He can't play forever, and I hope Ben realizes that. And like you mentioned, if they draft a quarterback, hopefully Ben will take him under his wing and, not openly. I don't think he'll make that same mistake. I think the last couple of years with the whole AB situation, I think he's kind of changed his approach about being so blunt when he's talking with the media. So, yeah, it's just that time's coming up, and he's had a hell of a career and he's made a ton of money. So it's tough to move on, especially for how long he's been doing it. But it's going to come up soon.
Whether he wants to continue, if he thinks that he has 1 year, 2 years, 3 years left, kind of what Ty said. He kind of better be ready to step up into that mentor role if it's necessary, because like I said earlier, there's 52 other guys in that locker room that want to win the Super Bowl. And if he truly wants what's best for his teammates too, he'll step into that role. We don't know Ben personally. We don't know exactly how that situation will go down, but it does seem like, kind of, Chris, what you said, after the whole AB situation, it does seem like his approach in talking to the media and his approach to just being a teammate and a leader has definitely changed.
That's what I was going to say. What would be interesting is if we see, a joint Pouncey Ben conference, like press conference or something coming up. That'd definitely be the way I'd see those two going out if they both ended up retiring together. I just think that'd be kind of a very interesting way to do it together, and kind of a very somber press conference seeing those two guys just retiring together like they've always said. I think it'd be a nice little poetic ending to both their almost, you could say, both Hall of Fame careers.
For sure, yeah.
And naturally, when you complete the ball 47 times, the receivers are going to have a good day, stat-wise at least. You can talk about, okay, it was garbage time, the Browns were in prevent, and we talked to Jake Burns of the OBR about that, in which Cleveland likes to play prevent a little bit too much whenever they're up big, and yes, that certainly played a role. But Juju Smith-Schuster, stat sheet-wise, 13 receptions for 137 yards and a TD. Deontay Johnson, 11 receptions for 117 yards. James Washington, 5 catches for 72 yards. Eric Ebron, 7 catches, 62 yards and a touchdown. Chase Claypool, who made his controversy after the game, as we mentioned earlier, 5 catches for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. And James Conner added on in pass catching, 5 catches for 30 yards. So what are we to make of this day? I guess you could say for the young receiving group, they've managed to at least have playoff experience, and hopefully that'll knock off some of the dropping next year, playing in, well, I guess about as high pressure as you could have a situation for garbage time, for lack of a better word, or at least being massively down and a defense just playing back.
I think that, like you said, it's a lot of good experience. Definitely 500 yards from the quarterback means that the receivers are going to, have a lot of opportunities to make good plays and catch some touchdown passes. And I think that they stepped up. They aren't in any part the reason for this loss. But I think what it really proved to me was that the talent is here on this offense. We have the playmakers. It's just up to the quarterback situation and the offensive line situation to really help these guys thrive and win these sort of games and get even more of that experience.
Because even if we lose a guy like James Conner and Juju, I still think this team has the pieces to be successful. Even if we draft somebody in the 3rd or 4th round, like a wide receiver or a really good running back, because there are some gem of running backs that people are finding in these mid rounds. We just have to be able to find them. So, just in conclusion, I think they all did a really good job. But this type of performance could also, tip the Steelers to potentially looking elsewhere and not re-signing Juju, which would kind of be a shame because he's, kind of one of my favorite players since he's been here. But this offense is just too talented, and there's just so many other needs on this team potentially, especially, offensive line. Re-signing Bud is going to be a priority. I just don't see the Steelers going to re-sign Juju unless there's a lot of cap relief somehow. which could be from Ben retiring or whatever. But just in general, I just think you need to make a lot of moves with your players, asking them to take pay cuts or, move around their contracts a little bit. But I just don't see that happening with all the talent, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I give credit to the receivers for how they played in the second half, coming back and Ben thrown for 501 yards, in the entire game. Most of the yards come in the second half, but I don't really know what to make of it because the Browns, like you mentioned, Ty, were playing that prevent defense type of, defense, and the Browns are weird. This is the third game this year where they got out to a really big lead and then kind of made things interesting towards the end. It happened against Dallas this year and Tennessee, so I mean, it's kind of credit to them for getting out such big leads, but then they kind of just let teams in it a little bit. But they finished it off though once they got to was it 35-22 or was it 35-23? I think.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think that the Jets or the Browns lost to the Jets just 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. This just shows you how unpredictable the NFL is.
Yeah, that's just how it is. I mean, it could have been any team. It's like, who knows? The Browns get the ball first. They probably are the ones that are fumbling into the end zone. It's just the red string of fate in the NFL is so fleeting. Anything really could happen. So now it's time we're going to play a game here. I'm going to call it good vibe, bad vibe. And this is going to be on the coaching staff because there's just a ton to talk about. And anytime the Steelers get these early exits or really any playoff exit, the Fire Tomlin crowd comes out of the roost. And of course, everything was all good whenever it was at 11-0, and whenever it all went down to 1-5 to end the season, it went down. So I'm gonna ask you guys. I'm gonna say the coach's name, and it's gonna be It's gonna be either or, good vibe, bad vibe. And then I'll go to you and you'll basically explain why you think of that vibe. All right? So we're going to start with Keith Butler. Good vibe, bad vibe.
Good vibe. I'm just going to go with good vibe. The only reason is this defense is just too good. I can't tell if the defense is making them look good or what. I think certain things Butler does is really good. I love how aggressive he is at times. But I think with that aggression comes, those mismatches. Seeing a linebacker on a wide receiver every now and then. But overall, I don't think Keith Butler is really to blame for this downfall. So I'm just sticking with good vibe for him.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with good vibe too. I think that when you have a defense that's led the league in sacks for 4 straight years, and potentially the best defense in the league, back-to-back years. I'm going to stick with that coordinator. I'm still going to have belief in him. Is there room for improvement? Of course. But that goes for every coach and for every position in the NFL. If you're not improving, then then you're not going to win anything. So there's room to look back and say, okay, we need to address a couple things. We need to be better. And I think that as long as he's open to that self-reflection and he's open to improving on his mistakes, then I'm definitely still riding with him.
I'll say bad vibe, just the way it ended, and he had a really bad scheme there for Baker at the the last game of the year in the playoff game. Overall, like you guys mentioned, this is really the first time all year that I complained about Butler, but the quarterbacks they played this year, they kind of beat up on a lot of bad quarterbacks or backup quarterbacks that they played. I don't know if Butler would have the same success if he was going up against Brady, Rodgers, or any of the other elite quarterbacks.
Yeah, I guess I kind of said it earlier, and I'm only going to say bad vibe because it's just that I want more innovation and I want more keeping teams off balance. I'm always saying that when it comes down to it, football is a chess game. It's sometimes how you position players, and you sometimes just put people in situations where they have to see things that they probably haven't seen. And especially in the playoffs, there's no better time sometimes to at least do some things that you might not exactly think is the right thing to do, but especially when your second best linebacker and ultimately his replacement is out. Sometimes you just have to go, we got to throw things at the wall and see if it sticks. So I guess we'll go offensive line coach. Good vibe, bad vibe.
A bad vibe, which was kind of surprising because a lot of people in the Steelers organization and the media, they were really high on Sean Surratt. And I think he needs better, younger talent to work with. I think, like I mentioned the last couple of years, I think Villanueva and Pouncey and DeCastro kind of, are on the decline. And I like to see him get, some fresh young talent and see what he can do with it. He was like a prodigy from Mike Munchak, but you know how that goes sometimes. Just because you work well under a guy doesn't mean when you step up to that position that you're going to excel just as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go with bad vibes. Just the overall decline of the offensive line play, these past couple of years since Munchak left, kind of leaves you in a situation where you almost have to go with that answer. But I will say the silver linings is that when he has had a young guy come through, I mean, Dotson played out of his mind this year. He definitely plays a big role in that. Banner was up to the challenge until he got injured. That's a guy who had jumped from a couple practice squads and then came to Pittsburgh, 6th-round draft pick, I believe. So I'm going to stick with bad vibes. In this scenario, I don't think bad vibes means move on from him, though. I think that you just got to give him the necessary young talent to try to get his hands on something that he can create, because the young guys that have come through, in these past few years, they have been solid contributors.
I think that's a very good way to look at it, actually. I was going to stick with bad vibe, too. I'm going to go ahead and just go with good vibe, just because you basically just convinced me. Just because I want to see him get more hands-on, some young talent, let him kind of build his own offensive line almost, you know what I mean? Just in the draft, just get some more young guys. If we somehow lose Al or Pouncey this offseason, maybe DeCastro even, unfortunately. Just let him, look for his guys and give him I'd say another 2 years to see if we can see some improvement. Because, this coming from that Munchak line, I think he's got potential.
Yeah, Jimmy actually just made me throw myself back into, I'm going to say good vibe, but I more or less say mellow, but it's only because, Jimmy, you actually convinced me, and it actually might take me off the ledge of saying fire most position coaches with it. Like, I had this earlier, I think you were actually on the podcast where I had the soliloquy about position coaches, but as I digress, yeah, when you really think about the good young talent he's got a hold of, so let's give him another year. He'll draft some talent in there that can do some things. I guess it'd say good vibe, but I wanted to make it either or. If I would have added the third choice I originally thought of, which was mellow, it would be mellow. Mm-hmm. But in terms of that, we'll say good vibe, just because Jimmy convinced me. Okay, so I guess we'll go with something that'll be a little bit more polarizing, and we'll go with the running backs coach.
I'm going to just go with bad vibe, just based off their performance. I'll keep it short. Just it's hard though, because if he had more talent, maybe like another back that could potentially make some noise, maybe it would be less of a bad vibe. But I'm just going to stick with bad vibe just because of the running back complete regression we've seen this season. It's just, I don't know. It wasn't up to par to Steelers football at all.
Yeah, I'll have to go with bad vibe too. But like you mentioned, Guthrie, I don't know how much he really, blamed. He should be blamed for, because I think Colbert actually hasn't done a good job of drafting running back. So
yeah,
I'll probably more point towards Colbert for that one.
Yeah, I'll go with bad vibes too. Not that the running game issues were really Faulkner's fault or anything. I think what really makes a running back is his offensive line. But at the same time, though, we've seen Snell come in, we've seen McFarland come in. Snell's been a contributor. McFarland wasn't able to contribute that much this year, and Connor's definitely his production's definitely decreased, year by year at this point almost. So I'm gonna go with bad vibes. Doesn't mean that he can't make it good vibes. If we fix up the offensive line, maybe draft another mid-round running back, even a high-round running back. But I'll stick with bad vibes right now.
Now that you guys have actually made me sat down and think about it for a little bit, I probably would want him to get some sort of I guess national media has latched on to Guthrie's take and say not Najee Harris of Alabama, as we're about to watch him in the national championship game, is going to be the guy that the Steelers pick up, and that would probably be a first-round draft pick, barring they decide to go another way with quarterbacks, because that is a glaring need in the future. But I would be fine with a second-round quarterback if it was, like a Wilson or a Lance, if they fall back far enough. But that's a thing for here nor there. Mm-hmm. So let him get a bell cow in the draft, and then I'll get back to you next year about that, because he had to deal with Jalen Samuels, his old mate from NC State, and Jalen Samuels ain't it. I don't know if McFarland hasn't gotten enough chances to show that he ain't or is it. And also, I'm leaning towards ain't it for Benny Snell. And James Conner, thank you for your service. I appreciate everything you've done since coming back from cancer. I'm pretty sure that's probably hurt your career more than anything else. You're a warrior. But if it came down to it, unless you are willing to take a massive pay cut to stay in Pittsburgh and accept the role as a secondary running back, you ain't it. It's just how it is. I'm probably not going to stick to defensive position coaches because I think they do their jobs well. So I'm going to add in an interesting one. Ike Hilliard. Good vibes or bad vibes? Now, I asked this because drops became a problem late in the season.
Man, I'm just gonna stick with good vibes, and that's all I'm gonna say. Just because of the receiver talent, and I don't know if it's all because he's there, but it's just hard for me to see him have a bad vibe with all those weapons.
Yeah, I agree with Guthrie. I think good vibe. I thought the receiver did a good job this year. It's a young group. It's really hard to tell. It's hard to judge position coaches because we don't know all the details that are going on, and that's for the head coach to decide. If he's not gelling well with his players or something like that. But as far as what I've seen, I thought Hilliard did a good job in his first year as the receivers coach for the Steelers.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the good vibes too, and I think my main reasoning for that will be the impact that the young receivers have had on this offense. This is a really inexperienced group, and we've seen that inexperience throughout the year. But they've also been a really productive group. Claypool had no training camp. He had no preseason. And then all of a sudden, week 2, he has an 80-yard touchdown against the Broncos. That's kind of unheard of for a guy who hasn't had many reps at all, at a pro level. And I think that, he's doing a good job with the young talent. I still think Deontay can be something special. Chase Claypool's showing really good early signs of being a really good player in his career. So I'm going to stick with good vibes for Ike.
I sung his praises earlier this year. I had that question with Bram Weinstein that he said that's actually a good question. I'm going to stick with good vibes, but also you got to look at the situation for a lot of these young wide receivers. They lost James Drake during training camp last year. And I'm not sure if they had an assistant wide receivers coach at that time or someone stepped in. So I'm willing to give it a pass with any issues they probably could have came up with the drops and something like that. Because last year it seemed like they were running blind in a way, unless Fichtner also assumed the wide receivers role because that was his old role with the Steelers before he became the quarterback coach. So all in all, good vibes. Hopefully, if the Steelers decide to go with another wide receiver in the draft, they keep up with that good tradition. Though I'm going to say more likely than not, it's not going to happen unless they lose both of Juju and Washington if his contract. But I think he has another year, so never mind. Who knows? Depending on what happens there. Naturally, I know that if I say Fichtner, what the answer is going to be. So we'll ask this to put it all as a head and kind of close this podcast season. Mike Tomlin, good vibes or bad vibes?
I'm just going to go good vibes. I'm a big Tomlin fan. But like we said earlier, there just needs to be some things that are learned. And I don't know how much more he can learn at this stage in his coaching career. But he's got to have another year. I want to see him with another quarterback other than Ben. That's my last request for Tomlin. I just want to see how he does because he got that team last year to 8-8. I just want to see, how it goes with him at the center for a couple more years. But after that, there'll be some bad vibes if we don't, get more playoff wins or at least a Super Bowl appearance.
I'm going to go with good vibes for Tomlin. I'm of the belief that, Tomlin is an elite coach. And then my biggest point to the argument is that coaches are really important in the National Football League, but I think just as important is consistency on that coaching staff. When you look around at the playoff teams, I can list them, but if you check in on the majority of those playoff teams, there is a consistency within that coaching staff. And I don't think, unless there's dire changes to be needed, I really don't think that moving on from a head coach is ever a strong move unless it's necessary. And in this case, I am very far from believing that moving on from Tomlin would be a good idea.
Yeah, I'm going with a bad vibe. Just it's the day after a playoff loss to the Browns, but this is the third straight year really where they've collapsed down the stretch. In 2018, they lost 4 of their last 6 games, and then last year they lost 3 straight games and missed the playoffs. They missed in 2018 as well, and then this year they lost 5 of their last 6 games, and then got beat at home by the Browns in the playoffs. And then if you want to go back further, they got upsetted by the Jaguars after the 13-3 season in 2017. So just the late season collapses and the lack of playoff success. I mean, since the 2011 season, the Steelers have won just 3 playoffs under Mike Tomlin. I mean, he's a great coach. I like him. I'm a big Tomlin fan. The Steelers will never fire him, but if he would be let go, he would get a new job in 10 seconds. I mean, he's a great coach. He's a great motivator. I think he connects with the players really well. Now, why they're collapsing down the stretch, I really can't put my finger on it. I don't know if it's a Tomlin issue or just maybe he needs better coordinators or better group of players. I guess I don't know. But as of right now, I'll say a bad vibe for Tomlin because. Especially going to the offseason, there's going to be a lot of changes, and with the way Roethlisberger looked down the stretch, I really can't see them being a playoff team next year.
I'm going to have a good vibe, but with a hot take as well. Good vibe, I think that Tomlin gets you into the dance, but also, I don't know if he'll take you home, if you know what I'm saying, but he took the lion's share of Ben Roethlisberger's career after Bill Cowher, and has developed him into an elite quarterback. There's no question about that. And I want to see what he would do to start off the career of a young quarterback in the future, a lot like Guthrie. I said this on Twitter. A lot of people don't necessarily agree with that. And I put Noel saying that he had the opportunity to go find a quarterback after Terry Bradshaw, let that off to Bill Cowher, who found Ben and won a Super Bowl with him, but wasn't able to capitalize and see if there was more potential Super Bowls down the road. That went to Mike Tomlin, who did win the 6th Super Bowl, and of course led them with the opportunity to get to 7th at the beginning of the last decade. And of course, in the 10 years process with that, the Steelers haven't made it back. I'm also going to say, here's my hot take. I think that in the future, Mike Tomlin will get something similar to a VP role with the Steelers. He will relinquish his head coaching duties, and potentially, Khan, the assistant GM who manages the cap, will become the GM in Pittsburgh. But Tomlin will stick around as some sort of vice president of football operations thing, and that way he's still with the organization, but he's no longer the head coach. I think the fact that he's stuck around after this, and there's been opportunities for teams to, unless the Steelers, of course, outright get rid of him, I just believe that there's something wacky that's going to happen in which he sticks around as a part of the Steelers organization because they love stability so much, but they do move on with a head coach in the future.
That is a hot take. Do you have a name that could replace him?
That could replace Mike Tomlin?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't
Nick
thought
Saban.
that far.
When do you think this will happen? After next season, or when is this? You think will occur?
Call me crazy, but I think after Ben retires, he may give it one more year as a head coach. But because of course the Rooneys don't necessarily like to let go of head coaches, and the one thing that he does have in comparison to Cowher is the Super Bowl. He got that early, so he's stuck with the organization since. That's where I kind of have this idea with a hot take. It's absolutely crazy, and I probably should be locked up into a loony bin, but I'm just going to say that because it's my podcast, and why not?
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers, they kind of held on to Chuck Noll for a few more years when a lot of people said that the game passed them by. And that's like when people mention like fire Tomlin, it's just like it's ridiculous because he doesn't deserve to be fired, and like Art Rooney too wouldn't do it to begin with, So I think he would leave on his own, and it'll probably be coming up soon. I think once Ben retires, like you mentioned, Ty, and it'll also be interesting to see what happens with Colbert because he's been on a year-to-year contract, and his contract runs out after the draft this year. So it'll be interesting to see if Colbert comes back or they give the job to Khan as the new GM, or Brandon Hunt's another name that who's in the front office as well has been mentioned to replace Colbert as a GM.
Steelers. Didn't they already lose a GM candidate to Carolina already? So yeah. I just think the Steelers like to do things to try to like hang on to their coaches in a way. And Tomlin's young. He's not Cowher, in which he might go off the media, even though he has like the mannerisms, the look, and of course the vocabulary to do it. I just don't know if he'll do that. And I'd like to believe that the Steelers have a coach. They want to make sure they keep him forever, and their Steelers way isn't replicated around the league.
And did you see the report about Khan? He was supposed to get the job with the Texans. I don't know if you saw that on Sunday morning. Adam Schefter reported it.
And they decided to go with another New England downtrot, but they may get Jim Caldwell. So, hey, You never know. And it's all just to keep Deshaun Watson happy. Yeah, so that's my weird good vibe, bad vibe, hot take. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And so now, final thoughts on the 2020 season and just the entire ride that we've had to begin this podcast and to begin this website.
Oh man, it's been a crazy season. Just how we started it and everything, and that was a really good year. I haven't looked at our final totals or whatever, like how many articles we wrote, but it was a really good year, and I'm looking forward to the draft process and bringing some new writers on to help contribute. But definitely a crazy season, just especially with everything going on with the COVID and everything. It was definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's final thoughts on this season. It was a crazy one. Strictly to the performance of the Steelers, started off great, obviously, and just a really empty feeling, these past 6-7 weeks. But in terms of, just as a fan and just me as a person, it's been, my favorite year so far because my team was doing well. I found the opportunity to write for this website, come on this podcast, just write and talk about Steelers. It's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to continue with this. We didn't win the Super Bowl this year, obviously. 31 teams have to come to that conclusion sooner or later, but definitely still positive, feelings stemming from, what happened this season.
Yeah, it's hard to, put it into words, but it's been a very, it's not obviously not a successful season, but it's just, this with this kind of stuff, it's been successful because we could have asked for a better year to get this all going. The Steelers really showed out at the beginning of the year. Even, it was just kind of a crappy year with the pandemic and stuff last year. And, we were nervous football wouldn't even happen kind of thing. And it happened, and our Steelers really did they really did perform for us at the beginning there, and it made football really fun and felt like it was kind of nice feeling like you're on top. But unfortunately, that's just the NFL's crazy like that, where you could start at 11-0 and then finish 1-5. That's just the crappy thing that comes with being in the NFL. But overall, it was a fun year, to cover and talk about. But I'm excited for the future of this team. Some of it looks uncertain, but still, the Pittsburgh Steelers will always be competitive, and that's what I like about this team.
Yeah, just the aspect of not having the fans at the games this year was a real downer. Obviously, I kind of mentioned a couple times during this year, it's really depressing seeing an empty stadium and then everything going on with the pandemic. And I know Ron Cook wrote an article for the Post-Gazette when they were 11-0. He wrote how we're happy that they're undefeated, but it doesn't feel the same just because with personal issues with the whole COVID thing going on and not having the fans there, it didn't have that same exciting feeling. And I felt the same way. And I know DeCastro mentioned he mentioned how there's no fans in the crowd. I think it was after the Washington game, and he said what are we even doing out there? Is the real powerful quote by DeCastro. And Ben's mentioned it too, how he wishes the fans were there. And that's really what I'm looking forward to until 2021 is things get back to normal and just have a more uplifting year. And I think I'm going to write an article here soon just about that aspect of this year, just how it was tough to watch to see with no fans in the crowd, and just made a real weird atmosphere.
It was a strange combination of the worst thing that could happen and the best thing that could happen for us, because I think it allowed us to really get a focus on everything that we did here with the Renegade Blitz. And with all of that, I mean, we're doing a podcast with me on a screen recorder recording our Zoom call right now, and it worked out in our favor with starting this podcast, everything like that. The 2 podcasts a week, almost readily available guests, and the entire line of guests is a mile long. And again, Chris, thanks for scheduling all those, getting those people working hard, sometimes overscheduling, but hey, that's what we did there. And Jimmy, thanks for coming on, especially a little bit with this late podcast, just coming out of nowhere. Guthrie for coming on here consistently just about every single week after, I think, beginning with Houston or something like that. Something along the lines there. We'd like to thank all of the guests for the preview podcast that would come on here. Chris Carter, DK of Pittsburgh Sports. And, of course, congratulations to Jake Burns of the Origin Brown Report. Thank you for allowing me to come on his podcast in the final week to talk a little bit about the Steelers and stuff like that. We hope that it's not at our expense ever again. We're still going to be like that one quarterback that you don't like that used to play up in the AFC East. We're still going to be here. We're going to be doing all types of stuff. We got stuff with the draft coming on. We're trying to acquire and find reporters that are going out to senior day, because anything that involves the future of the Steelers, we want to make sure that we have out there. We're also going to cover the past of the Steelers, because it seems like there's going to be a ton of Steeler representation in the Hall of Fame 2-day event this year. So whoever's coming out from the Steelers, we'll try to see if we can acquire interviews with them. Maybe get a couple special things. You never know. That's what we're just going to find out on this very, very dark, scary, but hopeful offseason for us with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We again thank you so much for taking just a little bit of your time out of your day just to listen to this podcast. We'll hope that next season ends in a much more happier, hopefully a Super Bowl with Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback, or whoever else may come up. We'll find out then. But as always, I'm Ty Polk. That's Guthrie Rasmussen. That's Chris Ward. That's Jimmy Spizzirri. There's also Max Rosenfeld, Luke Sawhook, the fearless leader, Zach Napolitano. This is the Renegade Blitz, and as news comes out, there's going to be more podcasts on the way. So again, thank you as always for tuning in, and here we go.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.